Crime is an action punishable by law, and compared to other periods in history, the 20th century saw a big rise in crime. Think of the 2 world wars alone. But with the invention of film, crime reports and their media relevance cemented the mythology around cases that we still remember today. Here we investigate 8 types of 20th century crime. Famous people have always been the target of kidnapping. In 1932, American hero Charles Lindbergh suffered the kidnapping of his 1-year-old son. The case caught international media attention, resulting in the tragic finding of the Lindbergh baby's dead body. But other famous sons were also abducted for money. In 1963, Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped at age 19 from his casino hotel room at Lake Tahoe and returned safely 2 days later when Frank Sr. paid the $240,000 ransom.
Scared. I was a little bit nervous naturally, but the only thing I could do is hope for the best.
So much of the Wild West legend is built around outlaws who rob trains and stagecoaches. However, the Great Train Robbery was in fact an English crime.
In Durham Prison, there were 3 of the great train robbers. The Home Secretary granted the public an inside view of how they're being treated because the men who complained of their life in the maximum security wing.
On the 8th of August 1963, a Royal Mail train heading between Glasgow and London was stopped and looted by a gang of 15 robbers. They got away with £2.6 million. A quick investigation in the subsequent days saw 11 men sentenced to terms of up to 30 years, but the bulk of the money was never recovered. Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler wrote about crimes behind the glamour of the golden era of Hollywood. However, reality always beats fiction. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was a pioneering comedian whose career suffered irreversible damage when he was dubiously accused of rape in 1921. And even more famous was Lana Turner, who gained extraordinary notoriety for what was called the Lana Turner Affair. She began a tumultuous relationship with alleged mobster Johnny Stompanato. On the night of the 4th of April 1958, the couple engaged in a violent fight that ended in Stompanato's stabbing and death. Turner reported that it was her 14-year-old daughter who saved her and ran for a knife while she was undefended. The crime was declared justifiable homicide and the case was closed.
Well, strangely enough, we have heard the same rumor, and it is not true. I should like to be the first to say that.
If we talk about art, we have to talk about the Mona Lisa. Da Vinci's Renaissance masterpiece was stolen on the 21st of August 1911 from the walls of the Louvre Museum in Paris, where she'd been displayed for 5 years. The crime shook France. The borders were closed, Louvre managers dismissed, and famous enemies of traditional art like poet Guillaume Apollinaire and Pablo Picasso were interrogated. It was feared the Mona Lisa had been destroyed. However, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence contacted the Louvre. Italian officials had arrested a man named Vincenzo Peruggia trying to sell the Mona Lisa and restore it to Italy. Peruggia was hailed as a patriot in his country, serving just a few months in jail. In 1914, the Mona Lisa returned to the Louvre, and its legend has grown stronger ever since. Espionage is a crime under the legal code of many nations. As we know now, the Cold War was a war of spies more than of soldiers, and in some cases spies were caught and swapped by the enemy countries. This is the famous case of Rudolf Abel, in reality KGB Colonel Fischer, who was captured as a Soviet spy in the USA in 1957.
In 1957, convicted Russian spy Rudolf Abel was sentenced to 30 years, escaping the death penalty after his attorney argued that the United States might want to swap Abel for an American at some future time. Now, Abel has been exchanged for U-2 pilot Gary Powers.
This type of murder, often portrayed in film, is defined as the unlawful homicide of at least 2 people, carried out in a series over a period of time, from Jack the Ripper to the acid bath murderer, John George Haigh, who in the 1940s was convicted of the murder of 6 people in England, using acid to then dispose of the bodies. Or the very famous Boston Strangler, Alberto De Salvo, who allegedly assaulted 13 women and strangled them in the early 1960s.
Massachusetts. The Boston Strangler's escape from a mental institute, this was his cell, sparked off a 30-hour wave of terror throughout New England.
Believe it or not, until the 1961 Suicide Act, the Parliament of the United Kingdom considered the attempt of suicide as a criminal offence, and those who failed in the attempt of killing themselves could be prosecuted. Terrorism is defined by the Oxford dictionaries as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. It is important to remark that scholars agree on one thing: terrorism is a disputed term, and very few of those labelled terrorists describe themselves as such. It is common for opponents in a violent conflict to describe the other side as terrorists or as practicing terrorism, from the French Jacobin reign of terror during the French Revolution to events related to Irish independence. From anti-colonial struggles in Palestine and Cyprus to left-wing and right-wing violent actions, terrorism is a word that tragically shaped and is shaping our history.